Okay, let's dive right into this. Today, we're breaking down Argentina's final warm-up test before they pack their bags for Kansas City to officially kick off their World Cup title defense. We are looking at their 3-0 victory over Iceland. Now, I know what you might be thinking. On paper, a 3-0 win seems like just another routine day at the office for the reigning world champs, right? But as we unpack the tactics and the specific moments from this game, we're actually going to uncover a really fascinating story. It's a story full of stark contrasts, some seriously gritty physicality, and, of course, the undeniable, absolute, game-changing gravity of one singular player. Let's get right to it and set the stage. 87,000. That is the massive sellout crowd that packed in for this match. And you know, what's incredibly unique here is the setting itself. We aren't talking about Buenos Aires or some typical massive European soccer hub. No, this was played at the legendary Jordan-Hare Stadium in Auburn, Alabama. It was an absolutely electric stage for a soccer clash, complete with Auburn's traditional War Eagle flight circling the stadium right before kickoff. It really just goes to show you the massive global pull of this Argentina squad. I mean, fans traveled from far and wide, basically recreating that fervent, wild atmosphere we saw in Qatar 3.5 years ago. They showed up for a show, and they showed up to see a team carrying the literal weight of history on its shoulders. And speaking of that weight of history, there was this really powerful quote from the broadcast that perfectly hit the nail on the head. Quote, "It's just hard to win the World Cup once. It's hard to win it back-to-back." So the crucial point we need to look at is how manager Lionel Scaloni is actually approaching this monumental task. And his answer? Continuity. In fact, over 2/3 of the squad that triumphed in Qatar is still right here. Scaloni has made a very deliberate choice. He's not doing a massive roster overhaul. Instead, he's leaning hard into experience. It's basically a ride-or-die strategy with his trusted veterans, the guys who have already proven they can handle the pressure of the absolute biggest moments. But, well, as you'll see, relying on experience doesn't necessarily mean everything goes perfectly to plan right from the opening whistle. So let's break down the anatomy of how Argentina finally broke through right around the 22-minute mark, because this really highlights a recurring theme of the night. First off, Iceland gets multiple chances to clear their lines right at the edge of the 18-yard box, but they just fail to get rid of it. They leave it lingering. Then Valentin Barco, who, by the way, was highly active all night long, he smartly stays with the play as the ball bounces around in traffic. And finally, through this absolute sea of bodies, Barco just fires off this low, instinctive left-footed snapshot. Honestly, by the time Iceland's goalkeeper reacts and goes full stretch, it's just way too late. It's a fantastic finish from Barco for sure, but we have to acknowledge that it stems directly from Iceland's inability to just decisively clear the danger. And that moment right there, that perfectly highlights the stark contrast that defined this entire match. On one side, you've got Argentina's clinical edge. They're capitalizing on half chances exactly like Barco's goal. But on the other side, you have Iceland's incredibly sloppy finishing. Take this massive missed opportunity for Iceland earlier in the match, for example. Albert Gudmundsson puts an absolutely dangerous pinpoint ball right to the back post. I mean, it was essentially an engraved invitation for a tap-in. But Mikael Igel Ellertson, who arrives perfectly on time, inexplicably gets right under the ball and just sends it flying high over the crossbar. Oh man, it's those pivotal moments, you know? That ability to convert when the window opens just a tiny crack. That is what really separates a championship-caliber squad from the rest of the pack. Okay, so as we moved into the second half, the beautiful game got, well, decidedly less beautiful. Things devolved into a really scrappy, highly physical affair. Valentin Barco, our earlier goal scorer, completely throws himself into this wild, out-of-control two-footed challenge that rightly earns him a booking. And from there, we just saw a steady stream of late tackles from both sides. The yellow card count was ticking up fast. Tensions even boiled over entirely at one point with a full-on shoving match between Alexis McAllister and Iceland's Isak Bergman Johannesson. And look, I absolutely have to point out a pretty funny observation from the broadcast booth. The referee, who seemed to have an incredibly low bar for blowing his whistle, was sporting a uniquely tight, let's call it a schmedium uniform. It felt like every single time two players so much as bumped into each other, the whistle was immediately in his mouth, just completely breaking up any flow or rhythm the second half was trying to build. So with the game getting totally bogged down in fouls and frustration, the entire stadium, and let's be real, everyone watching at home too, was asking one massive question. How much magic are we actually going to see from Messi? Argentina had been very carefully monitoring his minutes, keeping their superstar rested on the bench for the entire first half. But as he finally started preparing to enter the pitch for what is a staggering 199th international cap, the anticipation was just palpable. You could literally feel it. The big question was, could arrested Messi come in and immediately change the entire complexion of this gritty stop-and-start match. But hey, before we look at what Messi actually did on the ball, we have to talk about this incredibly fun detail caught by the cameras on the sideline. As Messi was warming up, the broadcast noted, quote, "the bodyguard. He's always by his side." They were, of course, talking about Rodrigo de Paul, who was right there doing warm-ups, literally shoulder to shoulder with Messi. It's a bit of a running joke for those of us who follow the team closely, but honestly, it's also a real testament to the true team chemistry and the deeply protective culture Scaloni has built around their superstar. Wherever Messi goes, de Paul is right there, making sure everything is okay. And let me tell you, as soon as those two stepped onto the field together, order was absolutely restored for Argentina. Let's move to and see how this builds, because we are watching firsthand exactly how a true generational talent impacts a game. Step 1, Messi enters the pitch. Literally within just a minute or two, we get step 2. He threads this beautiful, seeing eye ball straight through the Icelandic defense, finding Lautaro Martinez. The goalkeeper comes out totally late and out of control, takes Martinez down, and boom, wins a penalty. Step 3, Messi steps up to the spot. The keeper tries to wait him out, but Messi just confidently slots it home with pure power to make it 2-0. And then, step 4. Just minutes later, he orchestrates the exact sequence that allows Thiago Almada to finish off a beautiful team goal. Literally in a matter of minutes, a scrappy, frustrating 1-0 struggle was completely transformed into a comfortable 3-0 rout. Just like that. Let's actually look a bit closer at that final goal, though, because it is an absolute masterclass in swift, connected passing. It shows exactly why dragging defenders out of position is so incredibly lethal. First, Messi initiates the attack, instantly dragging all this attention toward him, and then he finds his bodyguard, de Paul. Then, instead of just stopping to admire the pass, de Paul continues his penetrating run right in behind the defensive line. And at this point, as the broadcaster so perfectly described it, the Icelandic defense just completely melted. With Lautaro Martinez drifting to the far post and pulling even more defenders with him, Thiago Almada smartly covers the wide-open space in the middle, receives the super easy layoff from the pole, and just taps it in. It was such a fluid, devastating sequence that completely unlocked the opposition. So, looking at the final outcome, we've got a definitive 3-0 result for Argentina. Their match story is essentially one of clinical finishing when it actually mattered, plus the undeniable immediate impact of Lionel Messi coming off the bench. For Iceland, on the other hand, that 0 on the scoreboard tells a sadder story of sloppy defending in crucial moments and totally squandered opportunities. We talked about Ellertson's huge miss earlier, but late in the game, Gudmundsson also had this wide-open header from a free kick. He gave it the full, powerful Viking treatment, trying to just blast it, and ended up completely missing the target. You simply cannot leave goals on the table when you're playing the reigning world champions. It's that simple. Which brings us to our final question, and honestly the thought I really want to leave you with today. We saw Scaloni's ride-or-die veterans in action, we saw the immediate, game-breaking brilliance of Messi, and we saw some really promising flashes from younger players like Barco and Almada. But is this specific mix of trusted experience and emerging youth actually enough to defend the World Cup trophy? They passed this final litmus test in Alabama with flying colors, sure, but now the real journey begins in Kansas City. Can this squad defy the immense historical odds and do what is so incredibly, notoriously hard to do? Win it all, back to back. It's going to be an absolutely fascinating tournament to watch unfold. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.